All right, let's get right into this. So basically, on the farm, using a different camera setup, trying things out. Let's get right into it. This video is about FICA tax cap. Specifically, Bernie Sanders is kind of like the leader when it comes to ultra social, net programs that like keep people from getting below a certain poverty level. And because of that, he's a very, very popular candidate because his ideas are very out there, but they make sense. A lot of them, it would be nice if we could achieve those things. Now, one of the big things that he's known for is promoting legislation that would raise the FICA cap. Now, in 1935, the United States Congress passed the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, known as FICA. FICA taxes, that's where it comes from. Its purpose was to collect contributions to fund the new Social Security program established by the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt in the same year. So to put it simply, 1935 was a big year for Social Security. Now, here's the deal. If you go back to 2009, that was the first instance that Social Security protections were offered for raising the FICA cap. Okay, what is the FICA cap? The FICA cap is the limit where people above it don't have to pay FICA taxes, and people earning income below it do have to pay FICA taxes. The limit basically for 2025 is $176,100. So if you earn above $176,100, all those dollars above that amount, you don't have to pay FICA taxes on them. But all the money below that amount, you have to pay FICA taxes on it. Now, some people think that this is really unfair. And look, I'm just going to get right to it. If we could get the rich to pay FICA taxes on every dollar that they earn, we would never have a Social Security issue ever again. To be fair, the politicians would find a way to take more money from it, right? They'd issue more Social Security special interest bonds, right? They'd still find a way to snooker it away from us, and they'd still manipulate the cost of living adjustment math. So in that regard, the greatest criminals that ever existed against the American people financially would probably be the politicians. But the bottom line is, this idea is not new. For some reason, there's a lot of people in the comments who keep screaming at me saying, all we have to do is tax the rich more, problem fixed, thanks, full stop. I don't know why they keep saying full stop, but it is a thing now, full stop, right? I know the phrase, but man, they are just loving it. They are using it like it's just brand new and the coolest thing ever, okay? Here's the deal. Social Security Protection and Truth in Budgeting Act of 2009, introduced as H.R. 1276 during the 111th Congress. So we're talking 2009 to 2010 is when this idea really started to come out. Now, people will say the Democrats have the ultimate solution, the key to fixing this. And if it could be done, it would be an awesome fix. But it has existed in its earliest form since 2009. Now, Democrats tend to be good at promoting an idea over and over and over and over and over again, even though it can't get fixed. Good idea, but they can't seem to get it passed. Good idea, but they can't seem to get it out of the intro stages of a bill being introduced to the House or the Senate. Gets stuck in those committees, can't make it to the floor. This is kind of like when it comes to women's rights, when it comes to their body and having children. You would think that something would have been passed to change it back to being federally protected when Biden was in. But it wasn't. And that was the lesson for me when I learned that politicians on the left and the right, they will literally pass something or let something get passed just to piss you off. Because if you're angry, you will vote for a solution. And that is just like sales. If something happens, you will buy a product to fix the problem. Let me give you an example. Let's say that something gets released into the air, and you have to take this vitamin to go ahead and protect yourself from what was released in the air. Classic sales technique. You have a problem, you let it exist, you let it grow, or you let somebody create it, and then you either sell a solution or sit back and let people keep voting you in to fix it. Well, the raising the cap idea has been around since 2009, which means 15 years. We're going back through Biden, double Trump, Obama. We're going way back. No solution. Why is that? Let's keep learning. So the modern day versions of it are like the Social Security Expansion Act, Senate S393, introduced February 13th, 2023 by Senator Bernie Sanders, co-sponsor Senator Elizabeth Warren, Social Security 2100 Act, John Larson. That was introduced. That keeps getting introduced, although it's been changed. Past couple of years, big changes in that particular one. Now, Larson's legislation more closely was similar to Biden's because it had this whole donut hole idea in it. What is the donut hole idea? Okay, the donut hole idea is that we can raise essentially the FICA tax on higher earners. Biden was like, people earning $400,000 and above will have to pay FICA taxes on those extra earnings above that amount. But people in between the 100 and, essentially $76,100, right? In between that $176,100 and $400,000, they wouldn't have to pay extra FICA taxes. That right there was the donut hole. Larson, however, said people earning over $250,000 would have to go ahead and pay Social Security FICA taxes. So a much smaller donut hole. And the reality of this is that as we continue to raise each year what people have to pay when it comes to FICA taxes and how they have to pay in, how much they have to pay in, etc., it will catch up and erase the donut hole. That's the idea. Very simple. Okay, so at some point, everybody will have to pay these FICA taxes. Now, here's the deal. We have a cute little thing from Paycheck's website. Answers what is the FICA tax. It's a 6.2% Social Security tax. The tax is called the Old Age Survivor and Disability Insurance, or OASDI. It benefits retirees, disabled individuals under retirement age, spouses and former spouses, as well as dependent children, and many, many other programs. It also includes a 1.45% Medicare tax. The tax allows employees to qualify for Part A Medicare coverage with no additional cost to obtain coverage through Parts B, C, and D when eligible to do so. Now remember, that's not just what gets paid. The employee pays that, and the employer also pays that for the employee. So if you're ever going to go hire somebody, remember, it's the cost of what you have to pay them and what you have to then pay the federal government because you're paying them, and the time it takes to manage them, and all of the other programs, requirements, etc., insurance that is required to go ahead and, basically upkeep everything for them that's legally required. So in other words, it ain't cheap to get employees. It ain't cheap to keep employees. Now, the FICA tax rate is applied to all taxable compensation. This includes salaries, wages, tips, bonuses, commissions, and taxable fringe benefits. The IRS publication 15-B has a chart of various fringe benefits that are subject to FICA taxes and those that are exempt. What is the FICA withholding process? Employers must withhold both the employee's share of FICA taxes as well as the employer's portion. These taxes go through the IRS, followed by the Social Security Administration to fund retirement and disability payments. The remainder then goes to the federal government's Medicare Trust, which covers medical expenses for individuals age 65 and older or those who qualify for disability benefits through the 50-year rule. Now, here are some really interesting corrections from the SSA website about myths and misstatements about FICA taxes that have become commonplace to the American people. Myth 1, President Roosevelt promised that participating in the program would be completely voluntary. That was false, because you don't get a choice. You just got to pay it. You just have to pay it. You work, you got to pay it. You earn money, they go take it. They got to take it. Persons working in employment covered by Social Security are subject to the FICA payroll tax. Like all taxes, this has never been voluntary. From the first days of the program to the present, anyone working on a job covered by Social Security has been obligated to pay their payroll taxes. In the early years of the program, however, only about half the jobs in the economy were covered by Social Security. Thus, one could work in non-covered employment and not have to pay FICA taxes. And of course, one would not be eligible to collect a future Social Security benefit. In that indirect sense, participation in Social Security was voluntary because some people had to pay and some people didn't because not all jobs were covered. So, however, if a job was covered or became covered by subsequent law, then if a person worked at that job, participation in Social Security was mandatory. Okay. Most everything is mandatory now at this point with FICA taxes. There have only been a handful of exceptions to this rule, generally involving persons working for state and local governments. Under certain conditions, employees of state and local governments have been able to voluntarily choose to have their employment covered or not covered and go into a different type of pension system, which we know was recently affected by the Social Security Fairness Act. Myth 2. President Roosevelt promised that the participants would only have to pay 1% of the first $1,400 of their annual incomes into the program. The tax rate in the original 1935 law was just 1%, and they've been snuckering us with more ever since. 1% each on the employer and the employee on the first $3,000 of earnings. This rate was increased on a regular schedule in 4 steps so that by 1949, the rate would be 3%. Each on the first 3,000, the figure was never 1,400, and the rate was never fixed for all time at 1%. Okay, myth 3. President Roosevelt, he's the guy who passed it into law, that's why he keeps coming up, promised that the money the participants elected to put into the program would be deductible from their income for tax purposes each year. That is a false situation. There was never any provision of law making the Social Security taxes paid by employees deductible for income tax purposes. In fact, the 1935 law expressly forbid this idea in Section 803 of Title 8. Myth 4. President Roosevelt promised that the money the participants paid would be put into the independent trust fund rather than into the general operating fund, and therefore would only be used to fund the Social Security retirement program and no other government program. The idea here is basically correct. However, this statement is usually joined to a second statement to the effect that this principle was violated by subsequent administrations. However, there has never been any change in the way the Social Security program is financed or the way the Social Security payroll taxes are used by the federal government. However, I'm just going to add to that when they issue special interest bonds, they essentially take those funds and pay for things similar to how they would do it with general operating funds to operate the government how they see fit. So I'm just going to put that in there and leave that right there. The Social Security Trust Fund was created in 1939 as part of the amendments enacted in that year. From its inception, the trust fund has always worked the same way. The Social Security Trust Fund has never been put into the general fund of the government, unless, of course, they create special interest bonds and spend the money on general operating aspects of the federal government. Although they have to pay it back. It's a bond, matures 15 years, the whole schmutz. Most likely this myth comes from a confusion between the financing of the Social Security program and the way the Social Security Trust Fund is treated in federal budget accounting. Starting in 1969, due to the action by the Johnson administration in 1968, the transactions to the trust fund were included in what is known as the unified budget. That means that every function of the federal government is included in a single budget. This is sometimes described by saying that the Social Security trust funds are on budget. This budget treatment of the Social Security Trust Fund continued until 1990 when the trust funds were again taken off budget. This means only that they are shown as a separate account in the federal budget, but whether the trust funds are on budget or off budget is primarily a question of accounting practices, has no effect on the actual operation of the trust fund itself. Final myth. Myth 5. President Roosevelt promised that the annuity payments to the retirees would never be taxed as income. Okay, so remember how the government taxed you, your retirement benefits that you were going to go ahead and get paid down the line, although it's really future generations paying in. And then they were like, hey, here's the thing. We want you to have a really good golden era, when you retire, We don't want to screw that up. And then they said, you know what? We're going to tax your retirement benefits if you also work while receiving them. You know what we're going to do? We're actually going to increase those taxes on your retirement benefits. Yeah. We're going to do that to you. It's just part of the gig. Myth 5, President Roosevelt promised that the annuity payments to the retirees would never be taxed as income. Originally, Social Security benefits were not taxable income. However, this was not, a provision of the law, nor anything that President Roosevelt did or could have promised. It was a result of a series of administrative rulings issued by the Treasury Department in the early years of the program. Now, the bottom line is that in 1983, Congress changed the law by specifically authorizing the taxation of Social Security benefits. This was part of the 1983 amendments, and this law overrode the earlier administrative rulings from the Treasury Department. So basically, here's the deal. 1983, trust funds are running out. They had to figure out a fix. Their fix? Taxing retired people on retirement benefits that were already taxed from those people. Double dipping. Legal if the federal government says they're going to do it. Illegal if we do it. Yeah. There's a lot of that. A lot of, do what I say, don't do what I do shit. Yeah, federal government's full of that. So going back to this idea of magically fixing the Social Security trust funds using the Bernie Sanders, although it's not always been his idea, method of raising the FICA tax cap. It's been around for 15 years. It has never really made it in any real way to the floor. It is promoted mostly by Democrats as the ultimate fix. But if you were to go ahead and let's just say tax, let's just say a rich person. Okay, so let's raise it. Let's give you a basic number here. So we bring up the calculator. Let's say a rich person has 30 million in earnings. Okay, so and remember, sometimes they hide the earnings in different ways. Sometimes it's not income covered, but bottom line is, all right, so let's get some zeros in here. So what do we got? We got, okay, so there's hundreds, thousands, because we need one more. So now we got 30 million. Now we multiply that, but let's just say 15%. Okay, keep the numbers round here. Okay, they would pay, just so that you're fully aware, they would pay the rich people an extra $4,500,000 in taxes on their $30 million worth of earnings that they didn't have to pay before. Now, you may know that billionaires pay for politicians to do what they do. Okay? And don't think I don't see the people out there in front of the Tesla dealerships walking to their cars at exactly 4 p.m. when their shift is over from basically holding up a sign against Elon. I'm fully aware of what's going on. I got it. But at the same time, those richies on the right and the left, they ain't never going to let that FICA tax get booped. Republicans and Democrats, they throw a political event. There's some rich person there as the keynote speaker of the non-politicians. Because those rich people know in a single year, if they lose millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to new taxes, that's not good business. It's never going to pass. It's been around for 15 years. Stop putting in the comments that you definitively know how to fix Social Security benefits. I love it. I wish it would pass. I wish America worked differently. I do think the rich need to pay more taxes, but it's just not going to happen. It's not. If it was going to happen, it would have already happened. But you've probably noticed our politicians are more stuck to what the billionaires want them to do more now than ever. All right? Anyways, I hope you're all doing amazingly well. We're going to be going and doing the live video where I answer questions for free. Please remember to like and subscribe. Also, please remember to go to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. Throw some stars up there if you like. You get to choose exactly which ones. Please remember, I love to wake up in the morning and see those things. I also go live on Mondays and Thursdays. And bottom line is, today was later because I was working on the farm. That's why we have a different camera setup, a different backdrop setup. Also, if you need a private session for me to figure out a particular issue that you're having with Social Security benefits, private sessions, mini contract is below. I'll catch you in the next video, and I will talk to you very soon. We're going to be doing about 30 minutes of that, and then we should be good to go. Catch you soon at the next video. Catch you in about 10 minutes. Thank you so much. Attorney Walter Hnot. We'll go from there. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.